Welcome to another edition of the eSpot with Camille. The eSpot is your location for the latest in entertainment, beauty, and design from the people who make it. Thanks for joining. I am elated to share with you that with all the wonderful news that we're getting out of Washington lately, I wanted to bring on someone that can kind of give us some idea of what the hell to do. You know, like we're just so overwhelmed by all the negative energy that's coming out of there. So I brought on Mr. Robert Tyrone Reives II, who is originally an attorney from Stanford, North Carolina. He graduated from UNC-Chapel Hill. We will not hold that against him. But he's also the North Carolina House of Representative. You may have recently seen a video clip of him that came out in May where he was involved in a little...
Sometimes it's held back. And don't be point of order. Young man says point of order.
Okay, I'm hoping I wasn't the only one that got shocked by that comment, that the only reason you went to Harvard is because you were black and an athlete?
No, I did not say that. I said, did that end up being one of the reasons? I do not know that. I asked him this. Right. I asked him this.
Okay, all right.
I don't mind answering.
Jim doesn't answer the
Moving
question.
right ahead, I'm very excited to have him. He is the House Democratic leader here in North Carolina, so he can share. Don't understand how we got to where we are now, but you're there doing the work, doing the bills, seeing what's happening. What good news can you give us? What hope can you give us?
Well, first, Camille, thanks for having me on here. I really do appreciate it. Definitely an honor to be on the show. And I can tell you, the biggest thing is to engage. What's happened over the time that I've been in, and really I think over my adult life, is people have become so disengaged with government. And people have just, you know, it's kind of like we're taking the attitude that if I disengage, then all the bad stuff will just go away on its own. Right. And that's number one. Number two, one of the huge problems that you've seen, especially since 2008, is this thought process of getting a perfect person and a perfect candidate in the office. And if they're not perfect, I'm not voting for anybody. And that doesn't work. What we don't recognize is somebody's going to go into that office. So you've got to make a choice. And when you don't choose, you're making a choice. And so, I think if I would say anything, people have got to actually engage and be about the work of making government better. So but one of the things I think of is this. Obviously, this week's been a big week with the Supreme Court, a lot of decisions that people are upset about. But these are all decisions that if you followed politics, all of us knew were coming. Why did we know they were coming? Because the 2016 election was the election that determined what president was going to basically recreate the majority of the court. Right. And I remember distinctly listening to a lot of people who were disappointed with one of the candidates and didn't like the other candidates, that he said, well, I'm not going to vote. And so the candidate that won put in the judges that he wanted to have in office, and those are lifetime appointments. And they did not hide who they were. They did not pretend to be one type of judge and then got in and suddenly were in shock. They told you at that time that these things were going to happen. I mean, all of us knew affirmative action was going to end. All of us knew that a lot of these other culture issues that were coming up were going to be issues that were decided in the way that they saw this world should be. Mm-hmm. So with that being said, those are the kind of things we got to think about. I mean, even in this state court, we're looking right now at redistricting, and people do not keep up with redistricting. That's just something people don't really care about or follow. But every issue that you care about in your community, in our civilization, is affected by redistricting. It's just that simple. If you got a problem that you want to see get fixed, it gets fixed by being able to elect candidates of your choice. So I would really love to see people get engaged.
And I'm glad you brought up that point, because it really is bring up 2008, 2016. Those are the presidential elections, but the local smaller elections are the ones that really affect your everyday, because those are the ones that will decide whether or not these different other people get that position, like even still here in North Carolina, like with the different bands and with education on a local level. Because even though I think it's important that people realize that not just the presidential election day, but the local elections that really can affect your everyday life, because they can speak up for the wrongs that may be done by when you have a dictator president in office. President in office.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm telling you, it's really interesting. What folks don't understand is at the federal level, the president, at the state level, the governor, those are not the most powerful people in your government. For instance, in North Carolina, the most powerful person is never going to be the governor. The most powerful person in government is your president pro tem of the Senate. Same thing at the federal level. The most powerful person in this entire country politically is the head of the Senate. That's it. It's a 6-year term. They've got to convince, usually 49, 50 other people that they've got a good idea, and it's done. They create laws. The only thing that presidents and governors can do is execute the laws.
Yeah.
They can't create laws. These are the folks that create laws. If a governor doesn't like a law, he can't rewrite a law. He or she has to veto it and hope that the people that are in the legislature rewrite the law in the way that they see fit. And people don't understand that. I didn't understand that.
I thought since we moved back to North Carolina in 2007, and I was living in California during that time, and it seemed like such a big difference moving back here, having lived here before and had a great experience living here before, and came back the second time. I was like, wait, why does this feel so different? And things just seem to slowly decline to a point where I'm like, okay, I got to get more involved because this isn't right. When HB2 happened here in North Carolina, which was the House bill about bathrooms, when that happened, and then all the tax incentives left North Carolina for the film industry and so on, it was just like, a lot of those people who were employed by that, they moved. And of course, that meant a lot of progressive voters moved. And then the redistricting happened. I mean, it was like you said, you could see it coming. But at the same time, I don't think we realized what was coming was so far back in the future. Like we literally are going back into the 50s and the Jesse Helm era and Jim Crow era. Now in 2023, how do you think we can shift that narrative so we're going back in the future instead of, going back to the past? What do you, obviously getting more involved, but what else can we do? Or is there any glimmer of hope of things that we'll have?
Well, there's definitely hope. And I think the key point is recognizing that you've got the votes to do it. Most people, the majority of people think how you're thinking, in the sense of they want to live in a society that accepts them, that lets them be who they're going to be, that lets them be the best version of themselves without any type of interference. That's what everybody wants. Right. But what happens is you've got to understand that for all of the efforts that people have put forth to do the things that have made it necessary to, made North Carolina great. I mean, you think about what made North Carolina so special, and think of UNC-Chapel Hill in particular. Being a research place, it being a place. I keep forgetting. I'm sorry.
Eagle.
And Central too. Think of it like that. Central too. What makes it great? Diversity, being able to really, be whatever it is that you want to be, being able to be accepted. That's what really made us great. And then all of a sudden, you got to understand there are people who that doesn't make them happy. There are people who don't wake up every day saying, man, I'm looking forward to meeting somebody different. There are people who wake up every day and they want when the people they want to interact with are people who look just like them, act like just them, think just like them, and believe just like they do. And when they can't get it organically, then they use the levers of power to make it happen. So look, for instance, at the attack on public education. This goes on all the time. This is something we act as if this is brand new. When Brown versus Board of Education was decided back in, I guess that was 54, 56, Brown versus Board of Education comes down. The powers that be in Virginia were so against desegregation and integration that they shut down the public school system for 2 years. Think of the resolve that takes, that I will take the chance on nobody getting an education rather than having to be part of a society that allows all of us to get equal access to the same education. And so when you see the movement now, it's resegregating schools.
I mean, that's basically what the legacy, like all of that was put into place so that it was a way almost to grandfather in that it's only people that look like them that get into these colleges or private schools and so on.
Yeah. And it's, and that's the thing that we've got to do. But your question is, where is there hope? It's a matter of marshaling forces and people actually getting out and voting. So for instance, with redistricting, the reopening of the redistricting case for the House chamber is unprecedented. There's nothing. You never reopen cases unless there are new facts, new evidence, something else new. This was just we didn't like last year's decision. We're going to reopen and start again. The reason that's significant is because that decision was made by a court majority that just got voted in. And the Chief Justice lost her election, Chief Justice Sherry Beasley, by 400 votes. You get 400 votes in a church.
Yeah.
And so again, that's people not making the decision that I'm going to be involved and I'm going to make sure that I've got votes. You got to vote. If there's something that you have that's elected in your community, you've got to vote for it. If it's dog catching, you've got to vote for it, because that person is making a decision every single day. When you talk about issues that people that are hot button issues now, obviously relationships with law enforcement are hot button issues, but the focus ends up being on the wrong people. Your elected officials determine the atmosphere that everybody operates in. So for instance, let's say that you feel like that, you've got a bad police officer somewhere, which truth be told, most police officers don't want that bad police officer, but they are not the ones who decide that atmosphere. That's your city manager who is hired by your city council. So if you're not happy with it, then get a different city council. And those are the type of things that folks don't engage in. And so what we do is we keep getting mad at the symptoms instead of trying to figure out how to fix the actual problem. And we've got, and part of it is not just voting, but getting other people to vote.
So getting other people to vote, you said it was just a church amount of members that lost for Cherry Beasley. I want to bring up something because I've heard this on a national level, that it was also, she wasn't being supported by the Democratic Party because of finances. So can you talk a little bit about that? Like how, as someone who obviously has won several terms, how can the regular person who may not be the perfect person, or maybe they are the perfect person, but they don't have the financial support? Or because we've seen this happen with several Black women who have run in this state where they were overly qualified for the position, but because of the finances, people don't want to support or want to sponsor them because they haven't raised enough. They haven't done this and that. So can you talk a little bit about that? Because obviously you know how to work around that.
Well, Camille, it's an interesting discussion, and there's a lot to it. There's validity to both sides that you're going to hear on this discussion. And this isn't a political answer, it just really is. Right. There is a validity to the difficulty that African Americans have with raising money. There is an absolute validity, because the bottom line is that people tend to give to folks that they're familiar with. And I don't make that on the Democrat side as much about race as about a reality. The second thing that is also valid is that we as African Americans have an incredible amount of money in our communities that I don't know that we always make the decision to invest. And the reason I say that is this: there's a limited amount of money that's going to go into an election. So for instance, you use Sherry Beasley's election. Would I want them to invest in Sherry Beasley? Yes. One, Sherry's my friend. Two, I think she was the most qualified candidate, one of the most qualified candidates we've had run for either Chief Justice or for U.S. Senate. She's incredibly qualified. So I think she deserves it on that. Thirdly, I would say, because in my mind, you win North Carolina, that bodes well for the rest of the South. So those are reasons I would say. But also, being a person who runs our caucus operations, there is a real limit to money. Mm-hmm. So if I've got $100 in my pocket and I want to go buy groceries today, the truth of the matter is I can't get everything that's in that grocery store. There may be some things I really, really, really want, but at some point I've got to prioritize to make a decision. And I think that the response you would get from the national folk is they prioritize, and that's how we got Raphael Warnock in. And that would be the argument that they would make. They would say that they prioritize, looked at the numbers, and that's it. Well, what affects that, and what we've worked on, is, okay, you look at numbers. So what we've got to do is work on turnout. We've got to work on voter registration that then tells people who are looking from the outside, hey, North Carolina's doing this right. So we failed Sherry Beasley in that sense of not building up such an operation that it was impossible not to invest in us. That's number one. Number two, back to that money that's in the African-American community. I'll give you an example. I'm going to use that hated word again. Your UNC-Chapel Hill for you. I'm sorry, we got to hear it. But seriously, imagine this. And not just athletes. If African Americans that all went to just UNC decided we're going to start investing our money in a government that really invests in making Chapel Hill the university we went to. If all of these people, think of the billionaires, the black billionaires that we have, said, we're going to put our money into politics the same way that non-black billionaires put their money into politics, what we'd be able to accomplish. And I don't know why we don't do that. I don't know what it will take for us to invest in the same ways that you see other people invest. When, what we compete against at a state level, candidly, and it's not a secret in the political thing, is that, the Republicans have at least one, possibly two billionaires that will tend to fund most of their campaign operations. We're making our operations get funded off of $25 here for a person here, because our folks, are working class people.
Right.
We're doing plate sales. We're doing, all kinds of small fundraisers and small dollar fundraisers to try to do it. If you look at Obama during his fundraising, he did a lot of corporate fundraising, but he had got a ton of money from people just giving $5 or $10. And we just don't tend to invest. We as a people, not just black people, I'm just saying on the Democratic side, we don't invest in the ways that Republicans invest in government. We put our money in other places, and there's validity to that. But at the same time, it takes money to get a message. If you've got, think of your show, the difference between if you have a budget of $10,000 and you have a budget of $10 million, what that means for your ability to get your message out. And you're talented. You've won awards. You're good at what you do, but those awards can only take you so far in your exposure. At some point, you need investment from people who have the money to come in and say, Camille, we want to make sure that everybody hears your voice, not just your peers. We want to make sure everybody does it. Well, that's the same thing that happens when a person runs for office. We need money to be able to get the message out there. Right. And we just, and that's what I think happened with Sherry. And I think, unfortunately, happens with a lot of African-American candidates. It is really, really hard to get investment for whatever reason. And it's just, we're going to have to do it.
Well, I think that's an issue just in general that should don't run, because not only is it hard to raise the money, but even the salaries for some of these positions. I mean, once you get national, you're taken care of once you get 2 terms for life. But before then, on a town council, all those different positions, you kind of already need to be independently wealthy to be able to do your job and be able to be there for the people. So do you think there's any changes that need to be made there just so that we can get more great people in those positions? Because how can we expect for people to fight for a livable wage when they're not even getting a livable wage, so to speak, to be in that position?
Well, Camille, I think one of the things that you would think is the question you ask is maybe that's intentional to keep working people from being able to serve in these offices. Our state representative, and same thing with state senators, we get paid between $13,000 and $17,000 a year. So obviously you're not going to be able to make a living serving in that way. Well, one of the things that we could do, we're paid like that because we're supposed to be a part-time legislature. But unfortunately, what seems to have happened is that we've made ourselves a full-time legislature. Last session, we were in session the entire 2 years. Now, to give you some perspective, Texas, which is obviously clearly a much larger state, much more economically diverse state, and they outrank us in every kind of numerical way. Texas meets 3 months out of 2 years. Now think of that. They're able to get their business done like that. Virginia's able to get its business done in 3 or 4 months. I think Michigan is another state that has a limit on how long session can go, and I think they go 3 or 4 months. Wow. These other states are able to do it, but for some reason, North Carolina wants to keep its people in session all the time and with no steady schedule. So what does that mean? If I can't tell my boss that I'm even going to be in tomorrow to the office, if I can't tell her that, then that means that I can't even run for this job. And we don't know our schedule from day to day. Once in a while, we'll have an idea of our schedule. We don't even know what tomorrow's schedule will be. We usually find out from an email late in the afternoon. And, purposely, I'm not sure that that's not on purpose, because it makes it incredibly difficult to get people who really can make a difference to run. So you either have to be independently wealthy, own your own business and have schedule flexibility, or you've got to be retired. And I don't think that puts us in the best position to really be a citizens legislature. So what could be done is we could set limits. I mean, we could do that, but we're the ones that make the laws, and that's the problem. If you've got people who want to stay in session for 2 years, they're never going to pass a law that says, no, you can't stay in session 2 years. But we could easily pass a statute that just says, look, session is going to end July 1st. If the business isn't done, then it's not done. Or you can put something in place and say session ends July 1st and nobody gets paid another dime after July 1st. And, there are all kinds of things you can do to put in place. We're supposed to be January to July, and then in the odd number of years, and then we're supposed to be basically April to July or May to July in the even number of years. And we haven't reached that since I've been in office.
Wow.
But it works out for the people who have been in the majority since I've been in office. And again, I can understand that their position is it's not inconveniencing them, but I do think that in order to get true representation, you would want to do something that, even though it's not inconveniencing you, that makes it work for everybody.
Well, we know they're known for their sneaky tactics, like doing those votes at the last minute, and when they know everybody's at a certain celebratory situation that they should have been at too, and try to do votes and stuff. I'm not naming names, but you can Google and figure out what I'm talking about. Or, like they don't make it. They know what they're doing, but I think it's good information for us as public to know this kind of information, so we can do what we can with that information and choose to vote for the people who are not doing these sneaky tactics to make sure that our voices aren't heard, because that's the other part of it. When we vote for someone, we're assuming that they're going to stick in that party and they're going to good stuff we can do to help support.
The switching parties actually happens a little more often than you think it does. This is the third one that's happened since I've been in office. They're usually just not acrimonious. And normally it's somebody who has been pretty clear that they're shifting. And I would even say that even in more recent cases, that we've got to do our homework. Folks are sometimes clear about where they've shifted, where they feel, and what they believe, and sometimes we've got to listen. And again, that is that we can all be more involved, and we can all be more serious about vetting candidates. I mean, you see the same thing happen with George Santos. That in all seriousness, that would have taken a little bit of vetting. That didn't take a lot of vetting, but we've gotten so entrenched in party ID. We've gotten so entrenched in, my side's got to win, that we don't care. I would have loved to have seen somebody on his side say, this can't stand. This isn't who we are. This isn't good government. And really, that's the other piece of advice I would have for folks who are concerned about the way government looks right now. Whether you're Republican, Democrat, unaffiliated, whatever it is, vote for people who believe in good government. There are people in every single political party that believe in good government. Those voices sometimes get drowned out. So if you elect people that believe in good government, then it really doesn't matter as much who's in the majority, because they're going to make sure that government's running the way it's supposed to be run. And it hasn't been that long ago that we had government running the way that it should run. We disagreed with things, but you think back to some of the leaders that you had probably 20, 30 years ago. You could disagree with them on policy, but you still trusted them to make sure that the trains ran on time. And right now we're moving to a point where we're electing people who are openly and aggressively against good government. They openly and aggressively believe that if you don't follow what they say or do, there should be dire consequences. That, you see Florida's just passed a bill, not passed, but actually I think it did pass one chamber now I think about it, outlawing the Democratic Party. I mean, that kind of thing, you can't let that continue. And we had bills. I mean, we had a bill last session. I mean, when everybody's talked about abortion this session, well, before Roe versus Wade was overturned last session, we had a bill last session that people signed on to, saying that if you got an abortion, you should get the death penalty. If a person files something like that, at some point, if we're serious about protecting our rights, we've got to react. And we don't. I mean, people have just gotten so numb to some of the bad things that happen with people in government that we treat it like a reality show, and it's not a reality show. It's the most serious thing we do. Your government literally affects every aspect of your life, and your government literally will determine what will or won't happen with you. And that's the thing that you can get 100,000 people to turn out for a high school football game, But if you tell those same people when you leave to get into this game, you're going to have to vote, some people would walk away.
True.
And you've got to take it more seriously. And that's really my thing. And sometimes you've got to understand this isn't about who you personally like or who you'd like to have a beer with. This is about who does the best job. I've got several cousins that I love dearly and would do anything for them, would take a bullet for, but I know there are jobs they can't do. Maybe they wouldn't be the best surgeons, and there's nothing wrong with that. I wouldn't be a good surgeon. So, but we don't treat government like that. Too
Right.
bad.
Yeah.
And this is what I mean in the sense of we've got to do better about educating people about what's really happening. Another thing that I discuss with folks all the time is when it comes down to the budget and it comes down to money that's getting spent, and you'll always hear, well, we don't have the money to do X, Y, Z, but that's because folks don't really look at where that money's going to. And when you look at where the money's going to, you're just saying, well, we could not give Camille this $10 million to run a opioid clinic since she's never done that before. We could take that $10 million and put that somewhere else, those kind of things. And we don't pay attention to it and we just let it go. And so folks should really, really concentrate on what government's doing, how their money's getting spent, and what really benefits them. Because we also get caught up in issues that actually don't affect us one way or another. There are issues that we voted on this year that out of the 10.5 million people in North Carolina, probably 10 million of them will never personally experience. And again, it's not that it's not important, but it's about prioritizing.
Right.
And what our priority should be right now is building up the state. We're the 9th largest state in the country. We are the best state in the country for business. We have had an unprecedented run of economic development over the last 4 years. So what we should be doing is figuring out, what do we do now to support and supplant the people and the businesses that we've attracted to this state? And I don't know that we're always doing that. But what folks can do is identify things that you care about, recognize how government affects those things, and talk to your friends and family. I can go out and speak to as many people as I want to, but ultimately, half the people that I talk to are going to look and say, well, he's a politician. He's just saying it because of this reason. He's saying it because he's a Democrat. He's saying it because of these things. And they don't tend to listen. But who they listen to people that they see at home. So when you're home, you listen to your aunts, you listen to your mother, you listen to your family, your uncles, family, your friends. Those are the people that you actually engage with and say, okay, now if they believe this, I trust it. So we've got to take it upon ourselves to educate people. We've got to take it upon ourselves to support people. Again, getting back to the Sherry Beasley issue, one of the things that I talk a lot of times when I do talk to African-American groups is we've got to be the ones, if we want to see more representation in all areas, not just elected offices, but in jobs and things of that sort, we've got to support the people that we want to put forward. Right. If we think that we've got great people who could do great things for our community, we've got to support those people. They can't get there by themselves. None of us can be successful by ourselves. And we've just got to figure out how better to do that. And there are ways to do it. And sometimes it's just a kind word. It's just somebody coming up and saying, we know what you're doing. We appreciate what you're doing and want you to know that we're here to support you. Or even pointing out when I've got friends of mine that honestly will point out when we're in strange situations, like, this is my friend Robert. This is what he does. This is why I appreciate him being there. And that means the world, because when people hear that, they say, okay, well, there must be something to it. Maybe I need to pay attention. But what we tend to do in the social media world is we jump a lot on all of the bad that's going on.
Right.
And why not focus on the good? Because there's a lot of good out here. And if we focused on the good, I mean, you and I talked off camera about the challenges that you've had. I've had challenges, and some of the loss that we've experienced and things like that. And one of my friends asked me one time, well, how do you get through about losing your mother? Because we were incredibly close. I mean, she was my rock. But I told them I get through because of what she taught me. And I just remember all the good. I don't remember her illness. I don't remember, any of her bad days. I remember all of the good. Every time I do something, I remember something that makes me smile. And that's what I try to do when we're in government. I don't focus on the couple of bad apples. I try to focus on all of the good, strong, hardworking people that we have that are in government that want to make this place a better place. And I think if we did more of that, we'd really see things move forward. But it gets tough out here. You imagine being in an elected office and all you ever hear are all the bad things that you do, all the bad things folks around you do, all the bad things about government, then at some point you'd say, why don't I just go home? And so, but I've been lucky, and I know that that's what's worked for me, and I think it will work for a lot of people. Is that I always, not always, but most of the time, I'm hearing a lot of positive things from people, and a lot of great ideas, and that makes me know that I've got to stay here and make things happen for them.
Well, I appreciate all that you're doing for us here in North Carolina. I can't thank you enough for speaking up and speaking out, especially recently when there was a certain situation that happened in the House when somebody was trying to blame affirmative action for a reason. A certain Harvard graduate who was
fellowship to Harvard Law School. Yes.
I mean, clearly it was because of football. Like,
yes.
Yeah. Anywho, but that's what I mean. Again, we need people like you, and I'm so grateful we have people like you, because you do call out when there's something wrong that happens, but you also are there when the good things happen, and you help push those along. And we need people like you to speak up for us and who are really doing the hard work, because I tell you one thing, I'll give my dime and my time for the right thing. And that's what I try to do when it comes here, living here, because I'm that possible. So again, thank you so much for being on the eSpot. And if you guys ever have like a 10 million grant you're giving to podcasts, I'm all for it. No,
we got you.
I know exactly how to get all this, like the Oprah show. Okay. I heard there's a new studio in Spring Hope. Oh my gosh, we have a fun time with that money. Okay. Like the Oprah show. Okay. I heard there's a new studio in Spring Hope. Oh my gosh, we have a fun time with that money. Okay. Local, right? So again, thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful 4th holiday, and make sure everybody please follow and keep up with Leader Reives, and keep doing the hard work out there. If your volunteers are helpful and fundraising, share with your friends, let them know that whether you live in North Carolina or not, because there's somebody that's probably a Leader Reives in your county, your town, your state. Support them, help them, make sure they keep doing it, because we need them, because not all of us can afford to. But again, thank you so much for being a guest, and thank you, Uncle Stewart, for making the connection. I guess so. Shout out to Carolina. No, I'm kidding.
Please tell all your family members.
Thanks again for tuning into the eSpot with Camille. Make sure you follow Leader Reives, and make sure you keep up with the eSpot, because every week, new guests. You never know what we'll be talking about next. Thanks again.
All right, thanks.